We are full throttle into Christmas season, which means that by now you've probably heard a bunch of complaints from Christians like myself about how secularized the holiday has become, about how it's now about Santa Claus and Rudolph the reindeer and Frosty the snowman, and you'll probably hear the constant refrain that Jesus is the reason for the season. But I want to take a little bit of your time to actually unpack what that means, what Jesus is the reason for the season actually means. Because maybe you're not too familiar with what we actually mean when we say that, or maybe you have grown up in a Christian home like me and you're very familiar with Christianity and Christmas and the meaning behind it. But also like me, you have a tendency to get into the groove of the Christmas season without actually taking time to sit down and think about the significance of what this holiday really means and what we really mean when we say that Jesus is the reason for the season. When we say Jesus is the reason for the season, we're talking about Christmas. And what Christmas is about the birth of Christ. Now, the first chapter in the Gospel of John sums up the theological significance of the birth of Christ pretty well. Referring to God as the Word, John writes, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth." What John is talking about is what we call the Incarnation. The Incarnation comes from Latin, meaning to become flesh, and that is what happened. God became flesh, God became man. Through the birth of Jesus Christ, God became man. Jesus' birth was the single moment in all of time when God, who created the universe, took on the form of something he created. Before that, God existed in such a way that humans could never comprehend him in all of his glory. Now, it's the Incarnation that sets Christianity apart from other religions. Other religions are all about us trying to reach up to God, of us trying to become more spiritual, achieve some kind of spiritual transcendence, or maybe even become some sort of a god. But Christianity is the opposite. It's about God reaching down to man. And God did that through the person of Jesus Christ, who is fully God and fully man. God reached down to us by becoming man. The Bible teaches that after God created the world and made man in his own image, Adam and Eve disobeyed his command, which corrupted human nature and passed sin along to all of mankind. And sin entering the world created a bit of a paradoxical problem for humanity. I think Athanasius sums this up fairly concisely in a small work titled On the Incarnation. He writes, "For God would not be true if after saying that we would die, the human being did not die. On the other hand, it was improper that what had once been made rational and partakers of his word should perish and once again return to non-being through corruption." God had told Adam that if he sinned, he would surely die. Death was the consequence. And God, being completely just and perfect and holy, had to be faithful to his word. So when man sinned, when Adam and Eve sinned, death had to be the consequence. That was it. No questions asked. They had to die. But God had also created Adam and Eve differently than he had created the rest of creation. He created humans in his image. He literally breathed life into Adam. He had fellowship with Adam and Eve in the garden. There was something special, there was something different about man. He created the rest of creation and he said it was good, but he created man and he said it was very good. To simply let this special creation of his see corruption and death without the hope of redemption would go against his merciful nature. So how could there be death, yet not be death? That was the paradox of sin, and that was the paradox that the Incarnation resolved. Paul writes in Romans, "For as by the one man's disobedience the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience the many will be made righteous." That one man who made the many righteous is Christ. By God becoming man, being born of a virgin, living a sinless, perfect life, he was able to bear our punishment upon the cross and cover our penalty of death. And then he was able to conquer death once and for all by rising from the grave 3 days later. It is the Incarnation, God becoming man, that was able to resolve the paradox of how God could be both completely merciful on the one hand and also perfectly just on the other to redeem humans from our fallen nature. I love the way that G.K. Chesterton explains the beautiful but also somewhat mysterious nature of the cross and Christ's death upon it. He looks at Christianity, and he looks at the symbol of Christianity, the cross, and he compares it to a circle. And he kind of compares a circle to Buddhism or other religions similar to that. And so on the one hand, he has this circle. On the other hand, he has this cross. And he looks at the two different ones, and he writes this: "For the circle is fixed and infinite in its nature, but it is fixed forever in its size. It can never be larger or smaller. But the cross, though it has at its heart a collision and a contradiction, can extend its forearms forever without altering its shape. Because it has a paradox in its center, it can grow without changing. The circle returns upon itself and is bound. The cross opens its arms to the four winds. It is a signpost for free travelers." All of the religions, like Buddhism, that try to teach us about how to become spiritually enlightened or how to fix our own problems of sin, of how to reach up to God, they're all like that circle. They're all limited in how much it can go. Once you draw a circle, that is the circle. You can't extend it anymore. You can't make it bigger. Once you draw the circle, it's drawn. Those religions are a lot like that in that it's contained, it's limited to our own strength, to our own human strength. We can try to fix ourselves from the problem of sin, but we're fallen and we're sinful, and our human nature is so limited that we are weak and we are going to fail over and over and over and over again. But Christianity is like the cross. It says we can't fix ourselves, but we don't have to, because Christ did that for us. He took our place on the cross. It's not bound to anything. Like the circle is very finite and it's relying on its own strength, but the cross can extend its forearms. It can, when you draw a cross, you can make that cross bigger. You just take the line and you draw it up and up and up and up, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not bound to anything because it's bound to God, and God is boundless. It's about his infinite justice, his infinite mercy, and his infinite strength. And the cross keeps its arms open for everyone. Jesus says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." If you want to learn more about the offer that the cross has for us, check out the link that I've put in the description that explains that a little bit more. To sum up everything that I've talked about so far, the Incarnation stands at the heart of Christmas, even though it's often overshadowed in our modern age by the secular trappings of the season. But that somewhat cliche saying, Jesus is the reason for the season, isn't really just some cliche, fun thing to say, but it gets to the core of Christian theology. It gets to the heart of what it means to be a believer. The Gospel of John articulates the meaning of the Incarnation, explaining that the Word became flesh in the person of Jesus Christ. This divine act, where God took on human form to redeem humanity, is what sets Christianity apart from all other religions. So there's nothing wrong with enjoying the fun things of Christmas, the Santa Claus and the snowball fights and the penguins. I don't know what penguins have to do with Christmas other than they're cold. But it's fine to enjoy all of those things. It's fine to enjoy family and friends and Christmas dinners and gift giving and Christmas trees and ornaments and festivals. The whole list of things is good. God does want us to enjoy life. But don't let us forget why we're celebrating, the reason behind Christmas, which is the Incarnation. Because if there's only one thing that is ever worth celebrating in life, it's certainly the Incarnation. It's certainly that God reached down to us to restore a fellowship with him that was broken because of our own sin. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to also send me a comment or message if you thought it was good. And Merry Christmas.